Hello and welcome to Wisdom of a Lifetime. Today I got a really exciting topic called quantum information fields. What you're going to learn from today is that this is the field that actually creates all of the matter in the universe and reality. And more importantly, it actually allows you to interact with this field. And in this field, reality gets created. So we'll cover more. But before we start, I'd love for you to go to any of my social media channels and follow and or go to my website, wisdomofalifetime.com. So let's get started, and we will use AI to validate all of my claims. So let's start with what is a quantum information field and why is it important? But before I go there, I do want to talk about that what I'm talking about now is objective reality. And there's subjective dimensions that we can't understand, we can't measure, because that is part of physics, that we can only measure what we can objectively understand. Now, objective means that no matter who looks at it or calculates it, it holds true for everything and everybody because it's objective, like electricity or water or air. It's objective. It's what the universe is made of. It's objective capabilities. Now, subjective realms means like when you're sleeping, you have a subjective experience that only you can experience. And these subjective realms are believed to live in other dimensions, and we call them the spiritual worlds and so on. So, for all people that are very religious, I am not going to challenge or insult anything, but we don't know if these quantum information field or the quantum information field comes from God. We think it does, and we can't say God in science or technology. We can only postulate objective criteria in science. But we do have this idea that there's something going on with intelligence. And so we believe it's coming from somewhere outside of the objective realm of this universe. So let's get started. What's a quantum information field? So a quantum information field is believed to be the actual field that carries all the information of the universe, and it's interacting with each other in an entangled state. And that entanglement allows the whole field to communicate as one. And this is throughout the whole physical universe, this field exists. And this field really comes from this quantum vacuum, what we call zero state field or the real zero state energy. So let's ask AI all about this and get more information. And we'll keep going. And it's going to be a very fascinating topic. And I'll talk about at the end how to interact with this. So let's start with AI. Hey, Gemini.
Hey there. What's on your mind?
So can you explain what's a quantum information field?
Sure thing. So, a quantum information field is basically a way to think about the universe as a vast sea of information, rather than just particles whizzing around. Instead of focusing on the particles themselves, we zoom out and look at the patterns and connections between them. It's like trying to understand a flock of birds by looking at the overall shape they make, rather than each individual bird.
Now, isn't it true that from this quantum field actually exists what we call the zero field, the zero state energy, the quantum zero vacuum? We call it zero state energy.
That's a really interesting idea. The zero-point field, or quantum vacuum, is basically the background energy of space itself. It's like a constant hum that never goes away, even in the emptiest of spaces. So it's possible to think of the quantum information field as built on top of this foundation, like the patterns and information that emerge from that underlying energy.
So what was just said was that there's this 0 point energy that is at absolute zero, where it's supposed to be an empty space, nothing's supposed to existing, nothing is supposed to happen. There should be zero energy, but that's not true. That's old science 100 years ago. The new science is pointing that this is, and we know this for a fact, this zero state energy, where at absolute zero, it's supposed to be where empty space lives, with, is actually brewing with tons of energy. In fact, more energy than the actual universe is postulated. And this is all what we call, and we're going to go into more details, from this zero state energy is where the field lives, where all matter gets created. And you're going to see now, we're going to talk about black holes and how I believe, and many scientists I believe, that black holes has a very fundamental aspect of creation. So we'll cover this, and at the end, we'll talk about how we interact. So let's keep going. So Gemini, can we talk a little bit more about in this quantum vacuum or the zero state energy, this is where I believe we talk about virtual particles, where particles are coming in and out of existence, and where matter and antimatter are annihilating each other, and basically some matter escapes. And we believe that could be the creation of how matter shows up in the universe. Is that correct?
Yep, you're absolutely right. The quantum vacuum is like a constantly churning sea of energy, where particles and antiparticles are popping in and out of existence all the time. It's a little like a cosmic game of whack-a-mole, where these particles are constantly appearing and disappearing. Some theories suggest that this constant activity in the quantum vacuum might even be the source of all the matter in the universe. It's a pretty wild idea, and there's a lot we still don't understand.
Now, let's move on to black holes. Are there black holes in existence today?
Absolutely. We know for sure that black holes exist. Astronomers have found lots of evidence for them, like watching stars orbit something invisible and supermassive, or seeing the effects of black holes on the gas around them.
And black holes are first postulated in Einstein's field equations under general relativity. Is that correct?
Yep, black holes are a natural consequence of Einstein's field equations. Those equations describe how matter and energy curve spacetime, and under the right conditions, that curvature can become so extreme that a black hole forms.
And more importantly, that this black hole has this idea of singularity where basically it goes to infinity. And that's where Einstein field equation shows infinities. And these black holes have these singularities. And at the boundary of the black hole is called the event horizon, where nothing escapes. But actually, what we believe now, and we think to know from a hypothesis of Hawking radiation, that actually that's where matter is being ripped apart right at the event horizon of a black hole. Is that correct? And matter is spitting out and antimatter is coming in.
That's a great summary. Here's a bit more detail. First, the singularity. That's the theoretical point at the very center of a black hole where all the matter is crushed down to an infinitely dense point. Physicists don't love infinities, so we know there's probably something else going on there, but we don't have a theory yet that explains what. Then, there's the event horizon. That's the point of no return around a black hole. If you cross it, you're falling in for good. And finally, Hawking radiation. That's the idea that black holes aren't totally black after all. They actually radiate energy, and this radiation carries away a little bit of the black hole's mass, causing them to slowly evaporate over a really, really long time.
But the evaporation is matter, correct?
That's a bit tricky. See, Hawking radiation is made up of pairs of particles and antiparticles. Normally, they'd annihilate each other, but right at the event horizon of a black hole, some weird quantum stuff happens. One particle gets sucked in, and the other escapes. So it's not exactly matter in the traditional sense, but it does carry energy and momentum away from the black hole, which is why we say the black hole evaporates.
And black holes themselves are not just blobs in space. They're actually, they have angular momentum. They rotate at very, very, very fast speeds, correct?
Yep, black holes definitely spin. When a massive star collapses in on itself, any rotation it had gets supercharged in the tiny black hole it becomes. This is called angular momentum, and it's a property that all spinning objects have.
Now, additionally, that they're in the center of all galaxies, or these galaxies we know, including our own, there's a supermassive black hole spinning that.
Yep, astronomers think it's very likely that most large galaxies have a supermassive black hole right at their center. These black holes are absolutely huge, with some of them having the mass of billions.
Can you repeat over?
Sure, so those supermassive black holes at the center of galaxies, they spin really fast.
And what about primordial black holes? There's now the idea that at the Big Bang, right at the Big Bang, that there was primordial black holes that was in existence way before any of the elements.
Yep, that's the idea with primordial black holes. Scientists think they might have formed super early in the universe's history, maybe even right after the Big Bang. It's a little different from the black holes we normally think of, which come from the deaths of massive stars.
And what about Planck units? What about Planck units in the way of What are Planck units? Now, aren't they the smallest form of energy, even smaller than an atom or a proton or electron particles?
Yep. Planck units are like the tiniest measuring sticks you can imagine. They're so small that they're way below the level of atoms, or even the particles that make up atoms. A Planck length is the smallest distance you can theoretically measure, and a Planck time is the shortest amount of time you can theoretically measure.
So where am I going with all of this? So let's put it all together. That is very much postulated by many, many now modern scientists, not scientists from 100 years ago, that basically from zero state energy or the zero state field, which is empty space, is beaming full of energy, and we'll talk about that. And that energy is really escaping to create the universe with matter. Now, how does that happen? It happens in black holes. At the very t equals zero, meaning time equals zero at the big instant of Big Bang, there's primordial black holes spinning space. And in spinning space, it rips apart space, and we'll talk about it in a second. And that space then creates this idea of ripping across particles, virtual particles, and matter escapes it. And that's how many people believe now is the idea of how matter shows up in the way of plasma from the initial Big Bang. Now, more importantly than that is that as this appears, that there's intelligence going on here. This intelligence is highly connected across everything, which we call the information field. And this intelligence has this property called emergence. And so everything matter is not just hypothetically or randomly occurring, it's actually organized and highly intelligent. So let's talk about that in more detail, called emergence. Hey, Gemini, can we talk about emergence theory and how this applies to quantum information fields?
Absolutely. So, emergence theory is all about how complex patterns and behaviors can arise from simple interactions. Imagine a flock of birds. Each individual bird is following some basic rules, but together they create beautiful, complex patterns in the sky. That's emergence in action. Quantum information fits into this picture because it gives us a language to describe those simple interactions at the smallest scales. By understanding how quantum information is processed and exchanged, we might be able to explain how those complex emergent behaviors come about.
So what's being said here is that not only are we interconnected and entanglement, we know entanglement, we can talk about entanglement, we need to, it's part of the quantum theories and quantum physics, is that basically that everything's entangled, there's information, there's heart, and it's directing all of reality to emerge from everything being connected. Okay. Now, this also has more properties to it. That empty space is not empty, but think of empty space as a fluid. If empty space is a fluid made of these idea of Planck units that are smaller, way smaller than a particle, we'll talk about, or an atom or a proton, we'll talk about how small this is, that this is the makeup of the actual empty space, which you can think of like a fluid, like water is H2O, hydrogen, oxygen. These are the smallest units that make up empty space. And from that empty space, from the smallest unit, is where everything's interconnected, much like what we talk about wormholes and so on. So let's talk more about this. Hey, Gemini.
Hey there. What's on your mind?
So does empty space, could it be made of Planck units at the very smallest scales?
Yep, that's right. It's way beyond the world of atoms and even the particles that make up atoms.
And if we explain a proton, which is a part of an atom, which then make a molecule, is a proton, how many Planck units would be example in a proton?
That's a tough one to answer without knowing the exact size of a Planck unit. We can make an estimate, though. A proton is about 10 to the power of minus 15 meters in diameter, and a Planck length is about 10 to the power of minus 35 meters. So it would take about 10 to the power of 20 Planck lengths to stretch across a proton. But that's just a rough estimate, and the actual number could be different.
So now you're seeing that, hey, and you're looking at AI with all that intelligence from being trained by all of the information from the world. And you can see that that basically these Planck units are really the structure of space itself, and it's the fluid, it's the liquid. And so when you get a black hole that's spinning and it's ripping apart and spinning that water like in your bathtub, like it swirls around as you take out the plug, it swirls around. That's what's happening with a black hole. It's spinning, ripping, and then out comes matter from that. So that's the idea. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because you have to start thinking out to be more modern and be objective. We cannot be subjective. Of course, religion, we can talk about subjective things and God and other dimensions and realms. And I'm not really contradicting any of that, but that's subjective. In objective science, we have to talk about what is, we can all observe and all behaves the same way. So if there is a field that is generating all of reality that we know, the physical universe, how do you interact with this field? And I've just proved many, many questions of showing you how all this relates, from empty space to Planck units that make up the space to black holes that generates matter, so on, that basically you can interact with this intelligence. And this intelligence is beyond objective space. We don't know where it comes from. That's creating the emergence of all the reality. And you do that through intentions. Now, we talked in other episodes, basic intentions. As you go to bed, as you wake up, you can create attention. But that's just the surface. I have done over 20 plus years of this intention exercises for an hour and a half a day. And I'm going to tell you, this is the most powerful thing you can have. At my age, at 65 plus, I have mattered to manage every aspect of my life, from my health, my beauty, my wealth, my relationships, to everything, all my goals, all through intentions. When I create intentions, I tell the field what I want, and the field comes back to me and brings it back as a feedback loop. Now, how does these intentions work? We're going to go in much detail here in a second. Intentions are the ability to communicate with this information field that goes beyond objective universe. And we don't know where it sits and how it comes into existence from a science, because you can't measure it. But we know this information field does exist. And you can interact by intentions. And you have to do this by going into an alpha state meditation. And we talked about what alpha state was in the intention episode, which you can go back to. And in an alpha state, you basically calm your brain. And this is a meditative state. And you go to theta. And at alpha theta, it's a really good spot to be. That's when you set your intention. And you calm yourself down. You breathe really slow. You watch your breathing. You get to a very relaxed state just before you go to sleep, called alpha theta. And there is you set your intention. And you start with I am. And you write, I am healthy, or I am grateful for the great car, or I'm grateful for a great relationship, or whatever. And you state that and you claim it. And then you feel it, visualize it. It's already happened. And you feel it like it's already happened. And you do that over and over again for a goal. And you do that for like 5 minutes. Now, I do an hour to an hour and a half of this for all my goals in life, and it really works. And I can tell you from everything in my life that I've accomplished in the 20 plus years of practicing this, it is absolutely the truth, but it can only experience by yourself. So what you would want to do is pick one goal and do this over and over again for a day. Do the morning, night exercise and the basic intentions, and this more advanced intention. You basically do this intention with this one goal over and over every day for 5 minutes. Now, as you get more goals, you'll add in 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes as you add each goal, because it's going to get longer and longer. But you really want to take one, because you want to make sure that you know it works. You want to see for yourself and experience for yourself that this really does work. It's the truth. And modern science is just getting there, which we've known for thousands of years from philosophy point of view, that this really happens. Of course, we technically didn't know, but we knew we were interacting with something greater than ourselves. So this is what I recommend that you want to practice and try and see how it works out for you, and let me know.